Hi, welcome back to In the Loop. My name is Allison Villars, and I'm the Director of Health and Human Services here in St. Tammany Parish. And we're lucky today to have Ann Kungel with us. Ann is the Director and Coordinator of the Louisiana Prisoner Reentry Initiative. And these are citizens coming back into their home parishes. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of reentry, I'm going to ask Ann all about her. So Ann, what did you do before you did this?
I'm a retired teacher, so of course teaching in a classroom. Before I actually started working with formerly incarcerated people, I actually started working in a program based out of New Orleans where we worked with very low-income, high-risk kids in the city. And that allowed me a view that I hadn't had before of the problems that incarcerated families have, because it's a family, it's not just one person. And after I did that job for almost 10 years, spent a lot of time with the families, with the parents, and when I decided to retire from that job, rather than totally retire, I decided to start working directly with the communities on my side of the lake in Covington, and began volunteering with a Catholic nun that runs a place called the Blue Stand in the West 30s neighborhood. And through her started working with a Cornerstone program in New Orleans that deals with very good wraparound services for returning citizens, for people coming back from prison. And that led to me starting working with behavioral health court, the specialty courts, with my education background, being an education resource, and then being tapped to be community coordinator for the St. Tammany LaPrix.
Okay, so I want to back up a bit. You said specialty courts. So could you talk to us about, many people don't know what specialty courts are.
Sure. We stand out as a parish because we have them. A lot of parishes don't, a lot of states don't have them. The specialty courts are designed to basically help someone from having to go to prison. Someone has already been convicted, they have some sort of sentence, but they meet certain qualifications, but in lieu of going to prison, they can then be either in, let's see, there's drug court, there's sobriety court, behavioral health court, which is a mental illness and some sort of addictive issue, family court, reentry court that Judge Knight runs, which is a different program but also excellent. And the idea of all these courts, there's also a veterans court, is to give the interventions that are needed and to help someone be able to get on their feet instead of just sending them off to prison. They have a very good success rate, a lot of buy-in from the judges. I've been very impressed with the courts.
Well, one of the things I noticed about the courts, the specialty courts in particular, is that when people go there, and they go weekly at the first part of it, and that they have very special conditions put on them. So what would some of those conditions be potentially?
Well, I mean, for example, behavioral health court is the one that I spent a lot of time with. I was actually on the team for that. The teams for these courts actually meet. They look at the people usually weekly, kind of the support group that's around the judge that runs the court. Behavioral health court, they would have certain group meetings they would need to go to, certain medications that they were on and being monitored for. In my case, I was an education advisor, so if they needed their high school diploma or education work, then that's what I did. They have to show up at court. They have, you're right, once a week at the beginning. They have various phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and they earn their way out of those phases by doing all of the required required task and appointments and the things. If they do that well, then they can move to the next phase, which allows them to maybe come to court every other week, which allows better opportunities for employment, you know, because that's also encouraged, the employment. The goal is for them to phase out. And when someone does, there is a wonderful celebration. I know, at least in behavior health court, it is celebrated by the entire court, which is very rewarding to be present at and to see how they feel.
Okay, well, tell us about LAPRI.
All right, LAPRI, it stands...
I want to remind it, it's Louisiana Prisoner Reentry Initiative.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is a program that was brought to the state in 2015, I think, when it was first brought here. The state did a lot of research trying to decide how. We know we have an incarceration issue here. Louisiana's known for this, sadly. So there was a lot of real good thought and effort put into what programs are out there, nationally and otherwise, that will help with this issue. And they chose Louisiana, the Prisoner Reentry Initiative model. I got more aware of it in 2016 because that's when they formed a coalition in St. Tammany Parish. And that was largely done by probation and parole. Klein Jenkins would be a huge role in that. And basically
And Klein is?
And Klein is he's a supervisor at the local probation and parole office.
Okay.
Anyway, we got the very large coalition of interested parties through just PR, you know, getting hold of information out there and calling meetings. So St. Tammany was really already kind of stood out among the parishes as having a large contingent of just people, business people, church people, everyday folks on the street, you know, all walks, willing to stand up and say, hey, this is a problem and we're interested in it. Then it became more defined as to the model at the beginning of 2017. The model consists of a large coalition, which we had already formed, but then you need an action group, which in the case of LAPRI is a steering team. And that is a set of committees that are, you know, are topicked by the critical issues: housing, employment, transportation, substance abuse, mental health, legal issues, etc. From that committee comes the community coordinator, which is me, to kind of coordinate the committees. The committee's task is to gather resources under each of their topics. The first task, whenever you introduce LAPRI to a community, is to find out what are your barriers, what are your assets, what are your barriers, what are your gaps. So we did that in early 2017. I was named community coordinator then. And then after that, it was working on the committees, you know, helping the committees, the committee chairs, trying to develop more, recruit more people, and look at what do we have here in St. Tammany, what are we missing, and how can we begin to build what we're missing.
Well, you named a whole lot of areas, and in what I know about the parish, there's some significant gaps. So could you tell us about which areas were the hardest to get started or move on?
Are the hardest, because they still are. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm talking about is kind of our historical startup, but those issues are real, and they're still the hardest. The most difficult issues here are obviously affordable housing. It's very difficult for someone who is homeless to have a place to live, for example, because we don't have the Mission, we don't have Ozanomian, you don't have Salvation Army, we don't have any of the big resources that exist down in the city. So even now, because we continue to do all this now, even now, housing, our resources for housing now are sober living facilities. There are a few apartments. Many landlords will not rent to people with a record. Someone living at their own home. So housing is a big issue.
Okay, well, let me stop you there. So, you know, I've worked in this area a little bit before, and one of my concerns has always been that when we're talking about returning citizens, we gather employers into a ballroom and we talk to them about, you know, second chance employment and, you know, getting people to work, and that makes our community safer and more prosperous. I wonder why we haven't done that with landlords and realtors who have big complexes.
Well, and actually that is something we still need to do. I mean, that's one thing I'm hoping that this particular sit down will help with. We have had landlords, well, we've had realtors volunteer on our housing committee to try to do that. It has never gelled, so that's something that we need to do. One of the problems with that, because we have tested the waters in some different areas like that, one of the problems is, of course, a landlord wants first month's rent, last month's rent, deposit, first month's rent, and then there are all the utilities and all that. Just getting somebody in to a traditional apartment is very difficult. There is the North Lake Homeless Coalition, which is the kind of the feeder entity, which you know, that someone can register with, but
and then they have access to...
And then have access to some more resources for the funding. But there, at least our experience with that is it is a pretty long time period. You know, it isn't something you can do immediately. So it makes it hard for our population who often need something more immediately. But it is a resource that has been used by our population. But the barriers with the landlords are, they're not in my backyard, you know, the typical I don't want them. And then just the fact that we don't have the money to let them take a chance on somebody, you know. Really the only resources we have right now to help with funding for housing, if we aren't able to get resources through North Lake Homeless Coalition and all that registration process, St. Vincent de Paul, the Catholic outreach organization, has been generous in sometimes funding. You know, they can't fund huge amounts, but sober living facility, which is not everybody's suited for, because not everybody's ready for that. But for about $450 or $500, someone can get in a facility like that. And most of them that we work with have an ability to help them find a job, which we also help with. And then there's a way, because enough of them live in that unit, to get people back and forth to work. So that's one of the options we like to look at first. The other option is most people that come out of jail in this parish go to some sort of house. They go to their girlfriend or their mama, or, you know, some relation. But the problem with that is they often don't get to stay there permanently. You know, they're not contributing, they're not working, they're, you know, and people's edges rub against each other. And one of the biggest issues we have is somebody who has housing to start with and then all of a sudden doesn't. So there's a real urgency then to what do we do? How do we help this person?
So talk to me about what you would say to landlords who have not yet had a returning citizen come back into the community, to convince them that this is something that we really like for you to try, and what's in it for them.
What I have done when I've spoken to landlords myself is, this is not just a person walking in that has a record. This is a person that has a wraparound of a team working to help them. So they will not only have a job, because we cannot sustain them in this place unless they have a job. So we will make sure they have a job before we come to you. we will also have been given them some opportunities before we place them here, try to place them in your unit, that they have an opportunity to get transportation, because that is the second big deal here that we need to talk about. Because so I'll finish my talk to the landlord, and then I want to go on that, but that we will have found a way to make this location, because that's the problem. The housing isn't close to work, which isn't close to, it's a real totally complex issue with all those things intersecting. But we will have already decided that this site will work. And therefore they can stay employed because they're going to be able to get to and from work. So you're taking a chance on somebody, yes, but you're always taking a chance on somebody. We will, the background we can tell you is what we know it is, because we have worked with this person. You're not getting a surprise. They have a record. You can meet them, talk to them, and you know that we are there standing behind them.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think people would listen. So I know that transportation is an issue. So talk to me about, I mean, I know they need to get to health care, they need to get to court, they need to sometimes check in with parole. You know, I understand that their needs of transportation. So how are you all dealing with that?
Again, what we are doing now, just to bring us current, is we are now seeking funding. We're seeking funding from grants, so everywhere we can get money to try to deal with some of these issues, other than with the piecemeal stuff we've been having to live with. Transportation right now, Samaritan Center has donated free bikes from whomever, which is an enormous help. It's from nothing to a bike is a big deal. With the Trace, because that allows easier access. What we are, if we get volume, because right now we back up a bit, we had a little bit of a start of taking people through this LaPree model, and the model wasn't ready to work well. So we had 2 people, and they decided to work on it a little longer. So we have been in kind of a planning mode until recently, when we're now trying to do the grants and all that. So right now we have the bicycles. We also, because of Medicaid, most of our folks are on Medicaid, so they can get transportation to and from doctor's appointments, etc., on Medicaid. The other transportation that most of the folks we're working with right now, and I think when I say we're working with, we have not got a LaPree cohort, is what they call the groups as they come out. We had 2 people at the beginning of 2018 that there was a process, and we started working with them, and they're doing fine. They're out and about. We were supposed to get more. We were considered a pilot parish because we were ahead of the game with a lot of the other parishes. And so in the meantime, since we haven't gotten these official LaPree people, they're supposed to be maybe by the fall, we might have another group. We have just been helping people, basically those coming through the day reporting center in Covington. That is good for people to know about, because it is an incredible resource for people on probation or parole. It is paid for by the Department of Corrections, run by a company called Geo Reentry Services, and they have a van. So the wonderful asset, on top of they have some very good programming that is helpful and is part of the needs that can be checked off, as I have done this through the various requirements that people have to meet. But they pick up people in the morning, bring them to their site, which is easily accessed in Covington, and they will take them back and forth to work.
That's great.
And so the few, the people that we have worked with so far are just coming through there. We didn't want to sit idle. We have committee people who would like to do something to help. We were sitting in this limbo for all this time. So we have just started, especially the Housing and the Employment Committee, just trying to help people that need it through the Day Reporting Center. So that also, of course, education is a big need. And we have a HiSET tutoring program there at the Day Reporting Center. So they bring the people to the center, and then if they have to go to any of the people that are part of their contingent that is assigned to the Day Reporting Center, then when they have to go to court, they drive them back and forth to court. I mean, they are the transportation at the moment. And it's only one van, but it is a godsend, you know.
So what do you need in terms of transportation?
In terms of transportation, what we have asked for in a couple of the grants we're working on is, since the Day Reporting Center, run by GEO, has one van, we'd like them to be able to add another van, because we can't, there's only so much capacity that one van can do. They serve about 30 people, driving people back and forth. If we start employing a fair number of people, that or an outside vendor running, the problem with any of this intertwined stuff is transportation. And our parish is rural. A lot of it's rural. So we can't just do one little route is our problem. GEO has solved it by, not solved it, but of course it made it as effective as possible by doing pickup spots. So what we would like is to have more capacity, but also GEO last ability to take anyone anywhere is about 3 in the afternoon. What we'd like to do is have something running. People in this, a lot of the people coming out of prison do split shifts. They're in the entertainment, the refreshment, the restaurant industry, and they need some transportation going into split shifts and on weekends. So bottom line, if we had GEO during the day and somebody to pick up, afternoon, evening, and weekends, because otherwise we are only helping somebody maybe half the time.
Okay, so we've talked about a little bit of everything that you're trying to do. So talk to me about the volume. How many people are returning to St. Tammany Parish over time? Do we know?
Well, they're 458 coming out next year, or have been about 450 or so are in a category that we focus more on, more apt to recidivate, which would be moderate to high risk of recidivating. Recidivating means, you're not going to make it. You're going to end up back in prison, and that's kind of the population that is the most in need of help. If studies have shown that if someone is not in that moderate to high risk, they tend to do better without being over supervised.
Right.
And think of sitting at home with your mama breathing down your neck, when you're a pretty good kid. So we look at that number as more of a population we might draw from. And
so
when we look
are
at
all
our
St. Tammany residents?
yeah,
Okay.
I say that they're coming back to St. Tammany.
Okay.
That I know.
Okay.
What we look at is a group that maybe we could serve with our resources that we're trying to make available and buffer, is maybe 30 a quarter that we think we could concentrate on, and that's a lot of people.
220 people a year.
Yeah. And if we could get some of this funding, and that's assuming we had some funding, if we could get the funding we'd like, we could probably do 40 a quarter. And I think we could. But it's the other piece that has to be included in a real good program is all this stuff can be great. Somebody may have a job, they may be going to, that we have some very good Florida parishes does some excellent programs in substance abuse, and NAMI does. But if somebody doesn't go, or if they can't get there, you need a case manager. You need It's absolutely essential, and that's one thing that GEO has. So what we have, just because we feel like they do a good job, we would just like to be able to add another case manager or so there, because it's already, they know what they're doing, they work lockstep with probation and parole. But in all this development of what we do, one of the things that comes back to us from our mental health providers and our substance abuse, Florida Parishes folks and that, is that, you know, there is so little there's so little communication, true immediate time communication on, did somebody show up for their appointment? Did they come to the second appointment? Did they go to the third? And as all of us know, mental health, substance abuse, any of that, the regularity of you going is critical. And so even like an employer, our employment committee can follow up. But that kind of thing, all the privacy issues, which are real, and I get, but without some sort of certified ability that a person is allowed to, and in that little hub of they went, they didn't go, yeah, they went to job, well, why didn't they go to the job? Look at the law enforcement side. If they missed a day at work, well, there may have been something that happened on the mental health side that we don't know about. There may have been a death in the family. There's so many interchanging issues that unless you have somebody that knows the whole person, there can be much too harsh a sanction by probation and parole. They can be put in jail when their mama died.
Right. We need to sort of stop here. We're ready to run out of time, but I have one more question for you. How do they get in touch, a reentry person? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, the LaPree network is actually, we are given the people. There is an instrument called the Tiger, which they developed to do a better job of assessing risk and needs. And that will be given to people while they're still incarcerated. And then that pool of people that fit that moderate to high need and seem like a good fit for our program, then are brought to the St. Tammany Parish Jail, which is a local reentry facility. Then we as a team are told that these are the people that are part of this LaPree pipeline. So those are the ones that we are specifically serving with LaPree. Okay. Some of the folks we're serving now, we are just serving while we wait for LaPree. Right. But that's how we get them.
So if a landlord wanted to call you, what number would they call?
They could call my home phone, because I'm the kind of connector person. 985-264-4206.
Can you say it one more time?
985-264-4206.
Okay, and what email?
My name, Ann, A-N-N, Kungel, K-U-N-G-E-L, @gmail.com.
Okay, and that'll appear on the screen so people can find it. So we're very happy to talk to you, Ann. Thank you so much for being here and filling us in on what's happening with returning citizens from incarceration. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
This has been another edition of In the Loop, and we're glad you joined us. Thank you very much. See you next month.